addiction can be a terrible thing. We all have our vices. For example, I'm addicted to Transformers. Yeah. Some people are addicted to eating, some to gambling. One of the worst addictions you can have, though, is smoking. Did you know that in the United States, there are over 16 million people currently living with a serious illness caused by smoking? And not only that, but they probably stink to high heaven as well. Smoking is bad, and secondhand smoke is arguably worse because you're forcing others to smell your dirty, toxic fumes. If you learn anything from my videos, it's that smokers should be publicly shamed wherever they go for being smelly. The only thing that can truly break addiction is shame. Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers Select's Deluxe Class Decepticon Exhaust. This figure was released in 2020 as part of the Earthrise assortment of Generation Selects, and is a redeco and retool of Transformers Earthrise Deluxe Class Wheeljack. It's kind of astounding how little change you have to make to a color scheme to make a big difference in terms of overall aesthetic. While Wheeljack was a white, green, and red race car, Exhaust is a white and red race car. The white of his plastic is far more blanched and crisp than Wheeljack's mildewy hue, though the red takes a turn more towards burgundy than a hot-blooded crimson. This alternate mode is just as dart-like as ever, and I feel the paintwork does its job to bring out that effect as well as possible, with thin red stripes running down the sharpest through line like a built-in windstream. Those stripes double up behind the front wheel wells, and Exhaust's flank features similar sponsor markings as did Wheeljack, though not as many of them. The most blatant parallel between the two is the continuation of Wheeljack's katakana trend, with the word Decepticon emblazoned on Exhaust's livery. The only other notable marking on this alabaster race car is the logo bearing Exhaust's own name. I remember the many laughs that were had upon this figure's initial reveal at this unfortunate misspelling, but I've heard some people assert that it's an unbelievably esoteric jab at the misspellings of brand names on Diaclone toys, such as Mirage's Gitan and Proto-Exhaust's own Marlboro brandings. That very same aversion from inadvertently selling cigarettes to children is the reason the front end looks so blocky and awkward. The original Diaclone deco featured Marlboro's iconic red chevron on the hood, but for obvious reasons, Hasbro can't exactly come anywhere close to recreating that. The last thing of note I feel I should mention are that Exhaust wheels are a nice muted gray, while Wheeljack's were orange. Since the wheels are only pegged in, and not very tightly either, I feel it's worthwhile to swap them around, as I feel they look pretty good with each other's wheels. It certainly helps lessen the red on Wheeljack and increases it on Exhaust. Of course, I fear doing this made my Exhaust front wheels exceedingly loose in their axles, but that's nothing a bit of floor polish couldn't fix. I think for the rest of the review, I'll keep the wheels swapped. Unsurprisingly, Exhaust transformation is exactly the same as Wheeljack's, and there really isn't any major change in the tolerances. The biggest difference I could discern is that Exhaust's neck platform has to snap into place, whereas Wheeljack's had a softer detent. The shin-mounted windshield shards are just as prone to falling off as on his predecessor, and things in general feel just as flimsy. I guess we had to wait a couple of waves to get an actually good car former, though that's a story better fit for whenever I get around to Sunstreaker. I guess one thing about this transformation that I didn't mention in Wheeljack's review is that unlocking the ankle pivot feels kinda nice, if that isn't something completely weird to say. Of course, I fear doing this made my Exhaust front wheels exceedingly loose in their axles. Coming into robot mode shows just how similar Exhaust is to Wheeljack when you get right down to it. A white and black robot with red highlights compared to a white and black robot with red and green highlights. It's honestly kind of astounding how little actually changes between the two of them, though the Toy Hack stickers for Wheeljack do help bring him into his own a little more. It's kind of wild that the arms are practically identical, with the only difference being the shade of white, and the thighs and pelvis are unchanged. At least Exhaust changes the mold layout a little by casting the shoulder joints and neck platform in black, which does just enough to break things up compared to Wheeljack. Far and away the most important change, as often goes with redecos, is the new head sculpt. Based on the original Diaclone figure, this helmet is pretty much the antithesis of Wheeljack's. Where Wheeljack's head sculpt is round with squared accoutrements and bright blue eyes that give off a sense of friendliness and positivity, Exhaust's head sculpt is sharp and covers the eyes with knight-like chevrons, so that one look at this smoker's visage lets you know that he's a total piece of shit. And despite its rather wide base, the ball joint allows for some really sassy tilts. For some reason I can't quite put my finger on, Exhaust seems to stand a lot taller and prouder than Wheeljack, even though they're exactly the same size. It's not something to do with the ankle joints, I checked. I don't know, something about that new self-righteous cunt head sculpt gives Exhaust a rather standoffish vibe, as if he's someone who's no stranger to picking fights whenever and wherever he pleases. He doesn't seem to have too many qualms about which faction his targets belong to either, as he's one of the first Transformers figures to sport the newly created Mercenary faction logo, which is really ironic considering his alternate mode has Decepticon spelled out in katakana, and his instructions literally call him Decepticon Exhaust. To be completely honest, I don't think a mercenary faction symbol makes much sense in fiction, unless it's just the logo of a very specific band of mercenaries under Double Dealer's command or something. Can you tell I didn't watch Earthrise? I do take minor disappointment in the lack of any sort of paint on Exhaust's wings, in stark contrast to Wheeljack's sultry silver sheen. I would have loved to see some blue, black, or red under there, just something to bring out the detail and make it pop. As they are, they look bland and washed out in that bleak white plastic. Exhaust's sole accessory is just a recolor of Wheeljack's shoulder cannon. This time, instead of being completely covered in silver paint, the main body of the rocket launcher is coated in black, while the rocket itself is left alone as bare white plastic. From far enough away it looks amazing, and I actually prefer this to Wheeljack's monochromatic missile launcher, though looking closely reveals a slight bit of paint bleed on my copy. I'm willing to bet that this is just a quality control issue on my copy, and your mileage may vary. Of course, it's not big enough of a problem for me to dock points away from this figure. As I mentioned previously, Exhaust's head is on a ball joint that gets a really nice range, which is kind of surprising given the shape of his helmet. It can go all the way around 360 degrees left and right, and it can nod up and down appreciably, and it can get a nice little sassy swivel going on here, where he can rock his head side to side. Like, look at that, he is so pissed off. The shoulders rotate outwards 90 degrees, and they can rotate all the way around 360 degrees, at least if you can manage to get them past the backpack. Biceps rotate, not 360 degrees, but about 180 degrees, more or less. Elbows bend 90 degrees, and they're limited due to transformation mostly, and thanks to transformation, the wrists can swivel all the way around. Also due to transformation, the shoulders are on another joint connected to the torso that allows Exhaust to shrug. The waist rotates 360 degrees thanks to transformation, and the hips move forwards, backwards, and sideways about as much as you could reasonably expect. The thighs rotate 360 degrees, and the knees bend about 90. The feet are on a series of multiple joints at the ankle, the most important of which allows for a great ankle tilt. And he can point his toe forward slightly, and he can point it downward very much, mostly due to transformation, but it does help imposability somewhat. So, Exhaust is pretty posable, though I think his arms are a little gangly and not as posable as you'd expect. Of course, I've already handled Wheeljack, so I could expect it, but if this is your first foray into this mold, I would be slightly disappointed by the arms. I wish they could pull off a double bend, because they are long enough, and that would really put this figure over the top into the adequate category, in my opinion. As is the case with most repaints and retools, there isn't much that Exhaust brings to the table that Wheeljack doesn't, especially considering that their overall color schemes are pretty similar, save for Exhaust's lack of green and silver. Of course, if you don't already have Wheeljack, then Exhaust is one good way to get your hands on the mold if this does it for you. There are a lot of things to like here, don't get me wrong. The racing livery is stunning and very dynamic, and the new head sculpt is pretty much perfect and gives him so much innate character. He's also not an Autobot, which I guess is something people care about regarding repaints. Given that he's a mercenary now, Exhaust can look at home providing support for Autobots and Decepticons alike, or even just doing his own thing with his own little motley crew. Of course, he's stuck with all the same engineering limitations as his moldmate Wheeljack, so as far as quality goes, he's not much different, and thus shares Wheeljack's rank of crummy. If you liked this video or otherwise found it helpful or informative, then please subscribe for more reviews like this in the future, and feel free to suggest topics for future reviews in the comments. When we return, we'll be wrecking and ruling with another look at the Studio Series line. This has been Kit Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.